Okay guys, in this lecture we're going to finish off our room models. We're going to do kind of a broad range of objects that hopefully will cover kind of all the modeling categories or scenarios you guys may run into while you're trying to finish off your rooms. I'm going to try to do all the models in two versions. I'm going to first do a low poly version, kind of a game, old video game, not next generation game model version, and then I'm going to do a second version with rounded edges and smooth and kind of universal asset style control cage modeling technique. We're going to do a bedpost today. We're going to do a cabinet, like a kitchen cabinet. I'm going to do a book, and we're going to do a couch. We're going to do some curtains. We're going to do a bedspread using two different methods, and then finally I'm going to do a tulip. So this will probably be a pretty long video. You're going to have to rely on that timeline to find the right spot. So the first one I want to do here is I'm going to go ahead and do a bedpost. So some of you guys had asked the question, what do I do when I encounter a shape like this, where I have a square, you can see it on this one, I have a square base for my bedpost, but then I have a round object on top. So the post is square for most of it, and then at the top it goes to a rounded object. So I want to show you one way to solve this. The first thing I would always start doing is I'll model this portion, the square portion of the bedpost first. So I'm going to go ahead and do that. It looks to me like it tapers down here at the base, and then it goes up about a foot to a foot and a half, or maybe about a foot here, and it tapers up to a different size, and then it stays square for the cross member here on the bed, and then it starts tapering down all the way to the top. So let's go ahead and do that. I'm going to go into my top orthographic viewport, and I'm going to create a standard primitive. I'm going to do a box. I'm going to turn on my snapping so that I get right on this zero line here, and then I'm just going to go ahead and create my box, and why not make it completely square. So again, make it square. I'm going to go ahead and hit enter with my right mouse button to exit box creation mode, and there we go, we have the starting point from my bedpost. I'm going to turn off snapping. Okay, so by turning on the snapping, I just made sure that my box was completely zeroed out on the origin, and that's not so important. It's just kind of good modeling practice. Keeps everything kind of precise and in the same place. I just hit the J key to get rid of my bounding box. I almost always turn off this realistic shading and just go to regular old shaded mode. Then I always also hit F4, which is wireframe on shaded, or shaded plus edge faces, as Max likes to call it. Okay, so let's go ahead and select my box here. I don't need to add any extra segments, so I'm just going to go ahead and convert this. So I just selected the object. I'm going to right click and say convert to editable poly. Alright, when I do that, I'm going to get rid of my grid too because it's kind of annoying me. Set the G key to get rid of that. I'm going to go here to the vertex level, and I'm going to select these base vertices, and I'm just going to taper those in a little bit. So all I did was selected them and then uniform scaled them. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and make this box a little smaller also, because I'm going to go ahead and say that my grid system, that each one of these boxes here represents 12 inches or 1 foot. So what I want to do is I want to make sure that my box is 1 foot tall. And then what I want to also do is I'm going to go back to my reference image here, and I just want to confirm here that I said it was about 1 foot from the ground here to this, where this crossboard frame here hits the object. So I'm going to go ahead and say that's 1 foot, although that's looking kind of small here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to scale this guy down a little bit, and then I'm going to just scale it up in Y until I get something that looks a little bit more like my shape. So I'm going to uniform scale. It just looked a little too stout, and then I'm going to go ahead and scale it up. Alright, and that's looking a little bit more like the picture. I can go ahead and confirm that by pulling this up. That looks pretty close to it. And then now what I want to do is I'm going to maximize my perspective view by hitting Alt W. And then I'm going to go ahead and select my polygon here. And if I consult my reference image again, I said that it was a tapering for about a foot, and then from here to here it was pretty much flat and stays the same. So what I want to do here is I just want to go ahead and do a regular old extrusion, and I'm going to pop over to my orthographic view, and I'm going to make this extrude about 12 inches tall. I'm not being that exact, but close enough. Okay, and then I said, basically looking at my image, that it stayed the same, but then pretty much from that point on all the way to the top it tapers down and gets pretty skinny. So I'm going to go ahead and extrude this one more time, and let's just calculate how tall this thing actually is. So if that's 1 foot, then I think this thing's probably going to be about 6 or 7 feet tall. So we don't have to be that precise, but it's always good to just have a ballpark figure. So the entire post is, let's just say, 6 feet tall, maybe 7, a little taller than a regular guy like myself. So there we go, we got 7. Actually, I'm going to make it about 6.5 because I still have to put the ornament there on top. And I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And then now I'm going to go ahead and hit the R key, and I'm going to uniform scale that post at the top to get that tapered effect that I'm going for. And that looks pretty good. Some of you may be saying, you could have selected that polygon and also done a bevel, and you'd be right, but I don't know. That's how I do it. I like to extrude and then scale down sometimes. Okay, so I've got my bedpost here made. Now I need to build the circular section here for the top, this little ornament thing here. Kind of looks like a smoothed up pine cone or something. Okay, so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to minimize. I'm going to go into create mode, and I'm going to grab a sphere. I'm going to turn back on my 3D snaps, and if you look in here I have it snapping to grid points, and I'm just going to make myself a sphere here, and I'm going to make it approximately the width of the top of my scene here, or the top of my post. I'm having a problem now because I have grid snapping on, so it's not going to create the sphere unless I make it 1 unit large, and that's just kind of an annoying little feature there of the grid snapping. So the price I have to pay for trying to snap this guy to the origin. So I'm going to do this a little different because I don't like that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to create my sphere first. So I'm going to say create standard primitives, and I'm going to do a sphere, and I'm just going to create it anywhere out here. I'm going to make it about the size I want to make it. There we go. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to move it. So now I'm going to hit the W key and move it, snapping to grid points, and that's going to allow me to center that thing right up on the origin. So I kind of bypassed the nonsense that Max was doing there, where it was trying to, it basically won't let you create the object unless you can snap it precisely to a point, which it's kind of annoying. Okay, so I just wanted to zero that perfectly, and then I'm going to put it right up there at the top of my post. And then I'm going to hit the Z key here to zoom in. And if you'll notice here, I've got my bedpost, which has 1, 2, 3, 4 edges. And then I've got the sphere, which has a lot more than that. So what I need to do is I need to make this sphere so it has kind of the minimum number of edges it needs to describe the shape that I'm trying to make, while still being somewhat compatible with this object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select my sphere here. I'm going to go into the modifier stack, and I want to get to the construction history for the sphere. And I'm going to change the number of segments down to something reasonable, like 8 is pretty good. So I'm going to do 8. And then I'm going to go ahead and change this object's pivot as well. So I'm going to convert it to an editable poly. So I'm going to right click on it and say convert to editable poly, and then I'm going to go ahead and change the pivot on this object. Go into the little thing here that looks like a squid, and I'm going to go to pivot, and I'm going to say affect pivot only, and I'm going to move my pivot of the sphere down to the base of the sphere, and then I'm going to exit Effect Pivot Mode, and I'm going to move my sphere into position. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is I want to shape this so it's a little bit larger than it needs to be, so I'm going to scale it down. You'll notice here when I'm scaling it's doing this squash and stretch, and what that means is I inadvertently hit a key and I changed my scale mode from the default, which is scale and uniform, to scale and non-uniform, squash and stretch. And I hate when that happens, but it probably has happened to you, and that's how you switch it back. So I'm going to scale the sphere down a little bit to fit inside the boundaries of my tapered top here. And I'm just kind of guesstimating. That looks pretty good. And then I want to go ahead and shape this guy, so I'm going to non-uniform scale up in Y, or Z. This is max, not Maya. And there we go. I've got my top for my bedpost here, and it's probably a little bit low poly at this stage in the game. Unfortunately, Max does not allow me to change the numbers of edges that I have in width and height, and it just does it uniform. So what I'm going to need to do here is I'm going to need to add some more edges to this guy. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my modifier stack, and I'm going to select this edge here and this edge here, and I'm going to go ahead and say ring, and then I'm going to go ahead and connect. I'm going to go ahead and I just want to add an extra edge to this guy, and I'm just going to leave it all at the default settings here, and I'm going to say OK. Alright, and then what I want to do here is I need to combine these two objects, and I need a little bit of a transition area between them. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go and I'm going to select these polygons here at the base, and then I'm going to go into edge mode again here, and I'm going to go ahead and select loop, and I'm going to loop all the way around. And now what I want to do is I want to extrude these guys, and the extrude edges in Max works pretty well for some things, but not so well for this. I still like to use extrude edge because it works so well in Maya, but in Max it's a little bit of a trick. So what you sometimes have to do is you can't really control how this thing flares out. So what I do is I just say OK and accept it, and then I hold my control key down and click on vertex, and what that does is it converts that edge selection to vertices, and then now I can just go ahead and scale these vertices down and get them to the shape that I want, and I can kind of pull these into position also to get the shape that I want. Alright, and then I want to go ahead and do that operation one more time, so I'm going to select those edges again. They're already selected. I'm going to say extrude. It's going to do it wacky. I'm going to just say OK. I'm going to hit the control key. You don't always have to hit the control key. Most of the time, if you just go ahead and convert your selection, I'm going to just do that again. So I'm going to extrude those edges and say OK. If I just click to the vertex mode, it should keep your vertices selected. Sometimes I use the control key as just kind of like an extra to make extra sure that it keeps those vertices selected. Alright, now I'm going to go ahead and hit the R key for uniform scale, and I'm going to go ahead and pull this down here, and that looks pretty good. And what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to almost get this circular object down to my square object, and at this point I could scale these down a little further to give it a little bit more of a taper, and I could also grab these guys and scale those out to round those edges that I just put in there a little bit more. And then I could grab this vertex here at the top and kind of pull that down. Alright, so the next step I want to do is I want to select my other object, my posts, and I'm going to go into polygon mode. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this little inset button. And what that's going to do is I have a habit of also performing this exact same function using the bevel tool, and what I do is I just use a distance of 0. The inset tool kind of does that automatically, and I'm going to try to get into the habit of using the inset tool for this purpose. Alright, so I just want to inset, and that's going to give me a polygon here, that I can use to connect these two objects. So what I'm going to do now is I'm going to delete that. So now I have a hole there, and then I have a hole for my other object. If I select it and hit the Z key, we can see here that I have a hole here and I've got a hole here in the top of my mesh. And my goal is to combine these two objects into one mesh. Alright, so now I'm to the position here where I can actually merge these two guys. I always, when I'm going to attach two polygon objects, or two polygon meshes, I always select the larger one first, and then I'm going to go ahead and say attach, and then I pick the smaller one. Okay, now these guys are attached, and now we actually need to merge these vertices together. And so what you may notice is that we have kind of an opposite, or my spherical object here at the top here has more edges on it than the post object. So if we just count the edges, I know we have 8 on this one, and it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4 on the post object. So if we want this to be a nice seamless connection, what we're going to have to do is we're going to have to go into edges, select this set of edges here, I'm going to select this set of edges here, and I'm going to go ahead and say ring. And what that's going to do is it rings those edges all the way down the base of my post here, and then it's going to allow me to essentially connect or add another set of edges in the middle. And what that's going to do is that basically gives me the exact same number of edges on my circular object as I have on my round object. Okay, so we're almost ready to make this connection. So the next thing I want to do is I'm going to go into vertex mode, and I want to make the opening here of my square post to be a little bit more round, just like my ornament here that I'm about to attach. So what I did is I selected all these vertices at the corners of my mesh that are square, and I'm going to uniform scale them, so I just hit the R key and I'm going to scale those down so that they are more circular to match this shape. So now that that's accomplished, what I can do now is finish this thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to stay here in vertex mode, and I'm going to go to the target weld tool, and I'm just going to go ahead and target weld these guys. So I'm going to pull them down, boom, and I'm just going to go around one at a time, boom, 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 and ba-boom, done. Okay, so now I've made my connections, and what I may want to do here is I may want to just add another edge loop here, just to kind of make this thing a little bit cleaner there, and maybe add just one more taper there. So I'm going to select one of these edges, and I'm going to go ahead and ring it, and then I'm going to go ahead and connect it, and I'm going to accept that, and then I'm going to convert that selection. Well, I don't have to. I'm just going to go ahead and scale that down with my edges there. I was going to convert that to vertices and then scale it down, but I realized that was unnecessary. I do that a lot. Okay, so there we go. We've got the round ornament tied into the square object. And at this stage in the game, if you were going to do this as a low poly object, you'd be done. It's totally done. This is kind of like old video game asset style where everything's got kind of a hard edge. So if you want to keep it simple and your requirements for your game engine are very light, so it can't push a lot of polygons around, you just want to stop right there. Now if you're working on a next-gen game and you want to kind of push the envelope and you want to make this thing a little bit higher resolution, you're going to want to do this next step. And that is going to be to round off all the edges on this object. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by selecting all of the exterior edges of my object. One thing you'll notice here, if I select one of these edges and then I go ahead and click on loop, so I'm going to click on loop. Sometimes, it worked this time, but sometimes it will not loop all the way around. So you want to watch out for that. So I'm going to select this and I'm going to say loop. And then I'm going to go ahead and select all the exterior edges on my object. kind of one at a time, so I'm just going around it and control clicking. And just the external edges. So I don't really want to select any of the internal edges, and you'll see why here in a sec. Okay, so I got all my exterior edges selected here, and then now what I want to do is I want to chamfer these guys. So I was kind of playing around and I was looking for a way, kind of an idiot-proof way, to chamfer an edge and have it work all the time, and so this is what I found. I'm going to go ahead and click on the chamfer button, and I'm going to go ahead and do the radius for the chamfer at something very small. So there we go. Actually it's 0.003 right now, so I'm going to go to 0.0015 if it'll let me. 0.002. Let's do 0.001. I'm going to say OK. Actually that's a little too light, because if I look at the photograph, let's look at my reference here. That's kind of a round, a very rounded, soft round edge. So I actually want to go a little deeper with this. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to chamfer it, and I just want to go a little bigger. And that looks pretty good. Maybe a little larger actually. Okay, so I have chamfered this once, and I didn't like the way that it was making this chamfer here wider at the top than this one. And the reason for, I believe the reason it's doing that is because I have such a great distance between this edge and this edge. It's actually changing the size of my chamfer. So I'm sure there's a way to rectify that, but I just want to show you guys this technique rather than getting into the nuances of that. So after I've chamfered the edges once, the exterior edges, what I need to do is select these edges again. See how they're already pre-selected. And I need to actually add to the selection these little interior triangle pieces that it created when I did the chamfer. And I just want to make sure that those are all selected for my entire bedpost here. So I'm going to scroll all the way down, and I'm going to select those here at the base as well. And then I'm going to go ahead and go up to the top again, and I'm going to chamfer this guy one more time, and watch what happens. It starts to self-overlap, and what I want to do is I want to dial here this setting until I have just a small triangle here in the middle. It's kind of hard to see, and it's a little hard to control too. So it's this chamfer width setting here, and I'm just going to do it until I have this small little triangle in the middle, and it creates 4 edges on the side. So the downside to this technique is that it creates 4 edges rather than the minimum of 3. The plus side to it is that it's very friendly, and it kind of just does a really good job and kind of works almost in any circumstance to create your chamfered mesh here. So now that that's done here, I basically have my smoothed asset, and if I go ahead and put a NURMS subdivision smooth or a poly turbo smooth on this guy, we can see here, I'm going to go ahead and turbo smooth it. There we go, turbo smooth. We can see here that I have a mesh that maintains that nice transition and maintains the squareness at the base, and then gets smooth up here at the top. Then of course, if we wanted to edit this in any way, if we wanted to tighten up the gooseneck here at the top, all we'd have to do is go ahead and select all these polys, and we can go ahead and uniform scale those down. If you wanted a nice little pinch there, or more of a pinch, you could do that. And then if I get out of vertex mode and go back up to the turbo smooth, we can see here that the object will basically turn in kind. I can also go in here at the vertex level or the edge level, and I can change the shape of this slightly. So if I wanted to change this and make it more of a teardrop or taper up towards the top, I can do that. And I'll just do it a little bit so you guys can get the idea. And then I pop back up to the Turbo Smooth and we can see how fast and quickly that edited. Okay, so that's a bedpost. Low poly and high poly technique for that. Let's move on to the next object. Let's go ahead and do a cabinet. So I'm going to reset my scene here. No, I don't want to save my changes. And some of you guys were doing like kitchen cabinets. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go ahead and create a standard primitive. I'm going to do a box. I'm going to do it in the front orthographic viewport to match the orientation of my kitchen cabinet. I'm going to give it a depth here, just kind of a standard cabinet depth. And then, as with everything, I'm going to hit the G key to turn off the grid. I'm going to hit the J key to get rid of that bounding box, and then I'm going to hit F4 for edged faces so that I can actually see what I'm doing. Okay, I've got a box here, and this represents a kitchen cabinet. So what I want to do here is the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a cabinet door. So I'm going to right click on this guy and I'm going to convert it to an editable poly. Once I've done that, I'm going to go into polygon mode, and what I want to do is I want to clone this object to a new element. So I'm going to hit the W key and I'm going to hold down my shift key, and I'm just going to pull that polygon off of the face here, and it's going to say, do you want to clone to element or clone to object? And at this point I'm actually going to clone it to an element, so I'm going to say OK. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to scale this door down, because cabinet doors are never the exact same size as the cabinet that they rest on. Alright, so I have my door here set up, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and extrude this guy. So I'm going to say extrude, and I'm going to give it a little bit of depth. Oops. And so I'm basically making my cabinet door there, and then I'm going to say OK. And then the next thing I want to do is I actually want to create kind of a decorative inset here for the door. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to inset this a little bit, and I'm just going to create kind of a gap there with no depth on it whatsoever, and I'm going to say OK. And then I'm going to go ahead and extrude it one more time. So I'm going to say extrude, and I'm going to drop this down into my door a little bit, and I'm going to say OK, accept that change. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the bevel tool, and I'm going to create kind of a decorative element to my cabinet door, like so. Alright, and we could, depending on what you're trying to do, you could recess it out more. Typically, cabinet doors, whatever the beveled element is pretty much flush with the door itself, so I'm going to go ahead and leave it. Say OK. Alright, so I got my cabinet door there. They're separate elements, but they're not separate objects. So we're to the stage now where actually that would make a nice low poly object. So if I was going to make a bunch of these, I could go into object mode, and I could just go ahead and hit the W key, and I'm going to hold down the shift key to make a copy of this guy, and I'm just going to offset it here. I'll leave a slight gap, and under here I'm going to copy it, so object copy, and then under number of copies I'm going to do 5, and I'm going to say OK, and look what it does. We got a row of kitchen cabinets for you, all done. Alright, so that is a low polygon kitchen cabinet. Now let's take this kitchen cabinet and let's make this guy high polygons. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to detach that door because it's just going to make this next operation a whole lot easier. So I'm going to go to element mode, and I'm going to select the door, and I'm going to say detach, and I want to create a new object, so I'm just going to accept that, the default there. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into edge mode for this box here, whoops, for the cabinet. I'm going to select all those edges on the exterior, and I'm going to do my magic little double chamfer technique to round off the edges of this cabinet box. So I'm going to go ahead and hit the chamfer button, and depending on how hard you want the edge to be, you can adjust the distance. Leave the number at 1, and I'm going to say OK. And then I need to select all those exterior edges again. It makes it very easy because this entire object is nothing but exterior edges. So I can select everything. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to chamfer it again. And then again I'm going to go in here to my magic little setting where I'm going to dial down the distance. And what I'm looking for is I'm trying to get these interior edges here to be about the same size. The gap, the spacing between all of these to be roughly the same size. And when that happens, when those are all about the same size, we get this little tiny, if I go to my smooth zoom here, I can zoom into the sky, we get a very tiny triangle right there, right at the center. And that's how you know you've done a pretty good job of making these all pretty much uniform and rounded all the way around. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK, accept that. And so I got my cabinet box completely rounded off. And I can render that out and see a nice rounded box. Now it's my turn to do the cabinet door. So remember, I detached the cabinet door to a separate object. So what I have to do is make sure I go to the top of the chain here. I'm going to hit the Q key so that I can select that other object, the cabinet door, and for some reason, oops, I accidentally hit the space bar and locked up my interface. I do that all the time. Alright, so I want to select this other object. Now I have it selected. I'm going to go ahead and go into edit mode, edge mode under editable poly, and I accidentally changed my selection there to a circular rather than rectangular monkey, so I changed that back. And I'm going to select all of these edges on this cabinet door, and I'm going to basically do the exact same operation that I just did. So I'm going to say chamfer. I'm going to do a small radius to begin with, smaller radius. And I'm getting this kind of artifact here at the edge, and I don't like that, so I'm going to go ahead and not accept this. I believe what's happening here is that if I pull this out, or I'm going to hide this other object, so I'm going to get out of subobject mode, and I'm going to select my cabinet door and say hide unselected. So when I went to chamfer this face here, or this cabinet door, and I selected all the edges, what was happening was I was kind of getting this exploded edge here. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. You can see this exploded diamond. That is kind of an artifact that I don't want. And the reason that's there is because I had left the back of this cabinet door exposed. And so what I need to do is I need to go into border mode, which selects that open border there. And I need to cap that. So I'm going to go ahead and cap that first. Now that I've capped that door so that it's completely solid, I'm going to go ahead and reselect all of the edges again, and I believe that this is going to solve my problem. So now I'm going to go back into the chamfer, and sure enough, it looks pretty good. The first one I'm going to do kind of larger, and then I'm going to say OK. Remember, we want to select all those interior triangles and polygons that get created, and so on this object there's nothing but interior, so we're going to select all the edges again, and then I'm going to go ahead and chamfer it one more time. And what I'm looking for here, I'm going to go to my smooth zoom by holding down the Control and Alt keys plus the middle mouse, and I can, instead of that rough mouse wheel zoom where it increments, this allows me to kind of do a fine zoom and get in there. I'm going to change this again to the point where I get something went wrong. Chamfer. Okay. There it is. Had to dial it in. What's going on here is the scene scale in my scene is pretty small, and so I'm actually having to dial this in manually rather than using the slider. And I'm trying to just get it as close to possible as uniform distance between these guys. And that looks pretty good. I'm going to just go in with my fine zoom and see how small that triangle is. And unfortunately I'm at the limit of my decimal places, so I'm just going to go ahead and accept this one. And it's okay. And then now if I deselect everything, you can zoom in and see that we've got nice rounded edges on everything and kind of like a factory look. And I can get out of sub-object mode here, and I just want to render off this cabinet door to see how I did. And if I zoom into the corner of it, we'll be able to see here in the render that we've got that nice smooth soft edge on everything. And then if I unhide the cabinet base, we can it helps if I just zoom in on the corner here and we can see how smooth and how nice this this edge is. Pretty cool. If I want to change this faceting, the way you do that, see how when I render this out, we kind of get this like faceted look here at the corners. That's not ideal, so the way to fix that is to go into polygon mode. So I'm going to select my cabinet base here, go into polygon mode, select all the polygons, and I'm going to go to auto smooth, and I'm going to put in a value of, say, something like 30, and then I'm going to say auto smooth. And then we're going to go ahead and render this again. And there we go. We got a nice smooth kind of factory edge there. And so there we go. Now if I go ahead and group these guys, so I get out of sub-object mode, I'm going to select these polygons and I'm going to say group. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hit the W key, hold down the shift key to make a copy, and I'm going to kind of space these apart a little bit. And then I'm going to say 5, say OK, and there we go. We've got a whole host of kitchen cabinets that we made at a film res level. Alright, so pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and reset my scene here. The scene has been modified. No, I don't want to save. Yes, I want to reset. Okay, the next object we want to do here today is a book. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my top orthographic viewport and maximize my view. And I'm going to go to create, and I'm going to do shapes, and I'm going to do a line. And what I'm going to do is just kind of draw the shape of my book cover, and then I'm going to put 3 edges for every 90 degrees of arc that I have for this detail. So that's my book cover, that's where the binding is. And now I'm going to hold down the shift key, and I'm going to come up here to the front of my book cover shape, and I'm going to go ahead and just make this one square, and then I'm going to hold down the shift key again, and then I'm going to drop the same number of vertices as I dropped to create the exterior as the interior. And then I'm going to go ahead and close my spline because leaving the spline open has been creating some problems for me that I just don't want to get into. So I'm going to go into line mode here, and I'm just going to briefly make a few edits to my shape. And there we go, we got my my book cover shape here, and I'm going to move these guys up a little bit like so. And that's pretty good. Okay, so we got the this is kind of like the classic hardbound Encyclopedia Britannica look that I'm going for. And what I'm going to do now is I'm going to minimize my viewport, go to my perspective view, hit the G key to turn off my grid, and I'm going to right click and convert this guy to an editable poly. And then once I've done that, what I want to do, I just hit the J key to get rid of that bounding box. And then I'm going to hit F4 to show edge faces. What I want to show you here is that if I go to polygon mode and I select this polygon, look what happens. It selects this entire polygon. But the goal of creating a polygon object is to have either 3-sided or 4-sided faces. Or in Maya calls them faces, in Max they call them polygons. So you want to have 3 or 4-sided polygons. So if I go to vertex mode, and if you count the number of edges here on this polygon object, we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and if I just keep going, this thing's like a 20-something sided polygon face. That's kind of a no-no. All your polygons should only have 4 sides or 4 edges. So this guy is kind of, although Max would render this correctly, and Max would know how to handle this object, if you brought this into Unreal or Unity, they'd freak out on you. They wouldn't know what to do. And so I want to teach you how to finish your mesh so that the game engine can handle it. And the way you're going to do that is you're going to kind of convert, if you have really crazy polygons like this where it has like 20 something sides or more, you're going to go through it and try to convert it to 4 and 3 sided polygons. And the way we do that is we go into vertex mode here, and I'm going to just select 2 vertices here at a time, and I'm going to go ahead and connect them and see what that did. That converted this into a 4-sided, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4 edges for 1 polygon. Alright, and I'm going to keep going down the object until I convert all of these polygons into 4-sided or 3-sided. 4-sided is your number 1 priority. Occasionally you're going to have something that's 3-sided. So I'm going to go into vertex mode here again, and I'm going to select 2 more, and I'm going to say connect. And then I'm going to try this with multiples to see if it works, and no, it doesn't. See what it did? It added an extra line there, and that's not what we want. So I'm going to go here and connect it, and then I'm going to go here and connect again. Oops, accidentally moved that one. Select another 2, connect. And I'm just being mindful of making sure that I go in order, and I just am connecting these together, kind of like down the river. So I'm making sure that every vertice has a buddy directly across from it, and if we did our mesh correctly, we'll end up with 4-sided polygons for the whole thing. So if I go to polygon mode, I click, there's 4-sided, 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 and 4-sided. So this mesh is kind of game engine ready. And at this point, what I need to do is extrude this guy. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to show you a new modifier. Watch what happens if I go into polygon mode here, and I select all these polygons, and I say extrude, and I extrude up. What happens is it leaves the bottom of this guy kind of open, and I could fix that, but I'd have to hold on the shift key here and basically create a copy of this and clone it to an element and then sew all these vertices together. And although that's not so bad to do, it's kind of a pain in the butt. So I'm going to show you another way to do this. What I'm going to do here is I'm going to select the top of my chain, so the editable poly, and I'm going to go into the modifier stack, and I'm going to add a modifier by the name of shell. And what shell does is it just takes my object and it creates depth, and it actually keeps the object closed. So that's kind of what we want. And then we can change the depth amount here. So I can keep dialing this up until I get my book cover here to the size that I want. So I'm going to hit the Z key. And at a certain point, that thing's really slow. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do this the brute force method, which is I'm going to go ahead and right click on this guy, and I'm going to collapse to all. And what that's going to do is it's going to take that shell modifier and it's going to bake it down and basically make the changes permanent. And then what I want to do is whenever you bake your modifier stack down and make it permanent, it always converts your object to an editable mesh. So I'm going to right click on my object and convert it back to an editable poly. And then I'm going to go into vertex mode, and I'm just going to select these bottom vertices here, and I'm going to make my book cover a little bit taller because that's what I was after. Okay, and now we've got kind of our low poly book cover. I'm just going to go in here and go into polygon mode and delete this edge. And all we got to do now is grab this guy, and I'm going to mirror it. So I'm going to mirror it across X, and I'm going to create a copy. I'm going to say OK, and then I'm going to move it into position here. And then at this point, I can go ahead and just kind of combine them. And so I'm going to say attach, and I'm going to attach the other side. I'm going to go into vertex mode, And now I'm just going to go to pop over to my orthographic viewport so I can make the selection of all those vertices down the center of the spine there. And then I'm going to go into weld, and I'm just going to dial up to a threshold where they basically weld together but don't weld together where I don't want them to weld, and I'm going to say OK. So we got our book cover. Now we need some pages. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select this guy, and I'm going to pop over to the top orthographic viewport. Oops. Starting to get some display issues here. So things are starting to display and not display, so I may have to close the program and reopen it. You can see here I'm getting some weird artifacts. Basically the edges of my model are not showing up, and I suspect my graphics card is starting to freak out on me. But I do want to finish this book, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to create the pages. So I'm going to go to Standard Primitives, Box, click in my top orthographic viewport, and I'm going to go ahead and create a page element here. And I'm going to inset that inside of my book. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to get out of box creation mode, and then I'm going to select my pages, and I'm just going to kind of put them into the book like so. And there we go. We got a low polygon book. So this would be kind of like the old school video game model. And I'm going to go ahead and save this scene. And then I want to come back, and I'm going to show you how to make this guy high poly. So I'll just pause, and I'll be back in a second after I reboot. Okay. So what happened there was I had a driver issue. The default driver for 3ds Max, if you go to Customize, Preferences, is this driver they call Nitrous. So if I go to Viewports and Display Drivers, under here the default driver that they use is the Nitrous driver. And that thing was causing me all sorts of trouble, so I switched it to OpenGL, and that has solved my problem. So here's my book, and it's got a low poly. This is just my low poly book, so I could go ahead and make a copy of this. Now let's go ahead and figure out how to make this into a high poly book. So the first thing I want to do is I want to chamfer all these exterior edges for my entire book. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and go into the editable poly for this guy, and I'm going to go ahead and go into edge mode, and I'm going to select all the exterior edges, and then I'm going to deselect all of the interior edges. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the chamfer button, and I'm going to chamfer this. I want to do one edge, but I want to make it a little bit deeper, and so that looks pretty good. I'm doing 0.03, let's just say 0.03, and then I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And then now what I need to do is I need to select all of these interior triangles that it made. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to select the entire book again, and then I'm going to deselect those edges on the interior on the back. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and chamfer this again. And what I need to do is come up with that smaller setting. And what I'm looking for here is to where these edges are kind of uniformly spaced, and I get a small triangle in the middle. So 0.008 is a little too big, so I'm going to try like 0.004. And I'm going to hit enter. That's a little too small, so I'm going to go 0.009. That's looking pretty close. I'm going to do 0.01, and that looks pretty good. So I'm going to go ahead and accept that. And now what I've done here is I have my book, and it's completely rounded on all sides, and is kind of more of a film grade asset. We get some of these artifacts in here on the interior, and we can see here that those have pinched up a little bit due to the fact that we've tried to keep this so we didn't actually have to chamfer these interior edges. So I could fix that again by doing the double chamfer and just doing a smaller amount each time, and that would solve that problem. But I don't want to go through that because I'll let you guys do that. So there's my rounded book cover with a little bit more of a film grade look to it. And if we zoom in here, there we go, that looks pretty good. Now let's some of you guys were asking how to do pages, and probably the best way to do pages for the actual book here would be to use a displacement map. But since you guys don't know what a displacement map is or how to use that, and we don't cover mapping in this class, I'll teach you how to do it using kind of a brute force method or using geometry. So I'm going to go into my box settings here, and I didn't delete the construction history on this, so I'm going to go ahead and increase the number of edges here to simulate a bunch of pages. And so a book really probably has like 300, 400 pages this size, but we can get away with either 50, I'll do 50 to keep it a little lighter. We can get away with 50 for just this simulation here, because we're just trying to simulate the look of pages. So I put in 50 edges, and then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and grab the modifier under the modifier stack. First I'm going to convert this guy. Actually I don't need to. I'm going to go ahead and leave it as a box, and I'm going to go into the modifier stack, and I'm going to apply a modifier called noise. And so I'm going to apply the noise modifier, and we can see here in the stack we get a new modifier up here, noise, and it's got a little plus key here. So I'm going to click on the plus, and we can see we've got subordinates to the noise modifier. We have a gizmo. You can't really see the gizmo because it just kind of wraps itself around the object. What I'm going to do is I'm going to pull the gizmo out. It doesn't really matter where the gizmo is in relation to the object. So I always just kind of pull it out so I can see it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the noise settings, and the first thing I like to do is I'm going to create a seed value. I'm going to put a seed value of 50, usually works pretty well. And then I usually click on fractal because that makes it a little bit more random, the effect. And then what I'm going to do after that is we're going to figure out the strength, and we're going to do it in X, Y, or Z. It can be hard to figure out which axis you need to use in order to get the desired effect. So what I usually do is I just kind of dial them up or down and see what it does. So I used X, and it kind of bent the book like that. And that's good. You might want to bend your pages like a little bit to give it a little bit of a non-uniform feel. But what we're looking for is I want to give that kind of page effect in the actual rippling of the pages. And as I'm doing Y here, we can see that we're starting to get it, but it's also changing the shape of the book pretty badly. So I don't believe that the value is going to be Y. And then I'm going to try Z. It's actually going to be Y and Z. But what I need to do here in order to exaggerate the effect is I need to actually scale my gizmo down for my noise modifier, and I'm going to scale it non-uniform in X, and you can see what happens here is it's starting to give me kind of that desired page effect. And all I got to do is I just have the setting too high, so now I'm going to go down here in Y, and I'm going to dial that down a little bit, and then the most obnoxious one is Z there, and see if I do that. We can kind of get that effect of the pages, and you can dial that up or down until you get the desired effect. But for my money, just for demonstration purposes of showing you guys how to do this, I'm going to accept that. So there we go. We got a book with kind of a page effect, and definitely I turned that up way too high. So being the perfectionist that I am, I can't take it, so I'm going to have to dial it down a little. There we go. And if you increase the number of pages, so if I went over here and went down into the chain, and I, instead of 50 edges, I did up 100, and we would actually get a little bit more subtle effect too. I don't exactly recommend that for you guys because that's a lot of geometry for that kind of an effect. So I'd probably do, for the number of edges here, for the box itself, I'd either do like a 50 or a 25, depending how close you are to. That gives it a little bit of interest, but would keep it a little bit lighter. So let's just do 50, and that looks pretty good. Alright, cool. And so we got our book with a realistic page effect. So pretty cool. I'm going to go ahead and reset my scene and we'll move on to the next object. So the next thing I want to do, we've done so far the post, the cabinet, and the book. The next thing I want to do is the couch. And so I'm going to do the couch from the reference that I picked. And let's just go ahead and check out some of these frames. There it is over here in the background. I'm going to see if I can find a better shot of it though. That's actually pretty good. Alright, so we got our couch here. And I want to encourage you guys at this point in the game to not always obsess about trying to keep your object as one consistent polygon mesh. So in the real world, this couch is actually made up of a number of components. So I want to go ahead and just break that down. This thing is made up of a bunch of different pieces that are basically assembled together. So the old paradigm for video game modeling was that everything you created had to basically start with a box model and then all be contained as one big hunk or one big piece. Film modeling in next-gen consoles are starting to film's always done this, but next-gen consoles are starting to allow you to be able to segment things and build objects kind of how they are actually created. So in this case, this couch is actually a number of components. We have these legs, which probably just screw on under here. We have this side piece, which looks like it's an upholstered piece that then gets joined to this other piece here, this section, the kind of cross member here that supports the cushions. And then I would suspect that this piece actually is one piece that goes all the way back up for the back. And then we got the cushions, so we got 1, 2, 3, 4 cushions. So we got a total of 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, essentially different elements that make up this couch. So the first one I'm going to build here is the side of the couch. So what I like to do when I'm breaking down an object and figuring out and planning out how I'm going to model it is I like to just look at it and say what is the most significant or what has the most shape for the object, what defines that piece, what's the most complicated piece of it, and then sometimes I will start there. So in this case it's the side. So I'm going to grab I'm going to do the side piece first. So it looks like it's basically just straight up, straight over. It's got a little bit of a curve here, another curve here, another curve here. Probably has a slight curve down here and then a slight curve down here. So I'm going to go ahead and draw that shape. I'm going to go into my left orthographic viewport to do it, and I'm going to go into the Create tab, and I'm going to grab shapes. I'm going to do a line, and I'm going to draw this one out as kind of a poly control cage. So I'm going to start here at the back of the couch, and we've got kind of a hard edge, and then it comes up here, and we've got kind of a hard edge, and then it comes down here, and we've got kind of a soft transition. And then it comes over here, and this is the armrest, and it's got kind of a hard edge, so I'm going to go 3 points there. And then it comes down here, and we've got kind of a hard edge, so I'm going to do 3 points. And then it comes back here. I can't see it, but I'm going to guess that there's a hard edge back here. So I'm going to go 1, 2, 3 points, and then I'm going to go ahead and close it up here. And so we have that side profile of that couch piece. And then I'm going to pop over to my perspective viewport and just take a look at it. I'm going to hide my grid. I'm going to hide my bounding box by hitting the J. So grid, G, hide, bounding box, J, hide. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to select this object, and I want to go ahead and right click on it and convert it to an editable poly. So I'm going to do that. And then I'm going to go in, remember what I said about having polygons with too many edges? So if I go to vertex mode, you can see here between two vertices there's an edge. So if I go to edge mode and I select, you can see here that we have a ton of edges. They're not showing up. There we go. I have a ton of edges. So remember, you always want your polygon to have a minimum or a maximum of 4 edges and a minimum of 3 edges. This one, this polygon here has, I don't even know, I could count it up, there's probably 20 something again. So what I want to do is I want to segment this model so that it has either 4-sided or 3-sided polygonal faces. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go to the inset, and I'm just going to inset this a little bit like so, and then I'm going to go ahead and accept it. And what that did was it just kind of caved that polygon in from all the edges, and it's going to allow me to now go into vertex mode, and I'm going to collapse some of these edges here because they're not really necessary for the interior shape of this model. So I'm going to select all these verts here, and I'm just zooming in so you can see here. I have 3 verts because I have 3 verts here, and so it just caved them in. And I'm going to select those, and I'm going to collapse those guys down. So I'm going to say collapse. Got 3 edges here. I'm going to collapse those down. These I'm going to leave alone. This one, interior, I'm going to collapse those down. These guys I'm going to collapse down. And these guys I'm going to go ahead and collapse down as well. Okay, so now what I need to do is I'm going to look, do I have only 4-sided and 3-sided polygons? Well, I've got 3-sided here, 4-sided here, but this one in the middle is still, who knows how many sides it's got, too many. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back into vertex mode, and I'm just going to make all the connections necessary. So I'm going to grab this vertex, and I'm going to connect it to its nearest neighbor on the other side. And I'm going to say connect, and then I'm going to grab this one, connect it to its nearest neighbor, connect. And then I'm going to grab this one, nearest neighbor, connect. And now do we have either 3-sided or 4-sided polygons? Let's do our check. Alright, so I go into polygon mode. I got 3-sided, 4-sided, 3-sided, 4-sided, 4-sided, 3-sided, 3-sided, 4-sided. That's it. It makes the check. It's either 4-sided or 3-sided faces. So this object would go into my game engine with probably no trouble at all and just come right in. Alright. Now what I need to do is I need to give this guy depth, because my armrest for my couch actually has dimension. So if you'll remember, I showed you the modifier called shell, and shell is going to just basically take this guy and extrude it and put it back on it, so it's going to make it a full mesh. And so I'm going to go ahead and increase the amount until I get this thing to be about as wide as my piece that's in the picture. And I'm going to go ahead and say okay, that looks pretty good. And then I'm going to go ahead and collapse this because I don't want that shell modifier up there. I'm going to say hold yes, and of course it converts it to an editable mesh. I want to convert it back to an editable poly. And now I have my armrest here for my couch. If I was building this as a low poly object, this is where I would stop. Problem with that is that the chair, or this couch itself, kind of is rounded, right? So if you just stopped right there and you had that very hard edge, it would not approximate this soft edge where the upholstery is very well at all. So what we want to do is we want to go in and we want to round all these edges. And the way to do that, kind of the easiest way, in my little foolproof method, is to go ahead and I'm going to loop these exterior edges and make sure that I selected them all the way around. And we're going to use that double chamfer technique. So I'm going to go into these edges and I'm going to say chamfer. And for this one, because the object is a little softer, I'm going to go a little wider with my chamfer. So I'm going to go about like that to give it a nice softer edge, and I'm going to say OK. And then remember, I have to select all these interior shapes again. So I'm going to select the whole thing, and then I'm going to deselect my interior edges. Whoops. I just realized I was about to do this a different way, but I think it's just going to be easier for me to go in and work my way around the object, selecting all these interior edges manually rather than the way I was going to try to do it. So I'm just going to go around and do these all manually, one by one. And it's a little tedious, but you know, to do things right sometimes that's the process. So I'm going to go in here and select these ones, work my way around, and come up here to the top, and I'm almost done, and I'm going to select these guys, and that's good. Okay, and then now I'm going to go ahead and chamfer this again, and remember I'm going to pull it back until I get to that. So I basically want all of my edges to be similarly spaced is what I'm looking for. And that fulfills the requirement. So I'm going to say OK. And now I've got myself my rounded object here. And I just want to make sure I didn't make any mistakes. And I'm going to go ahead and throw a NURMS subdivision on there and hide the control cage and see how I did. And we can see here that it actually looks pretty good. I hit it at 4. There we go. It's starting to look soft. It's starting to look like that actual sofa. And that's about what I want it to look like. So that's pretty good. Alright, so I'm going to go ahead and turn off the NURMS preview. And we're going to continue modeling the rest of the couch. So I'm going to get out of edge mode here. And I just want to do one last check. I want to apply a turbo smooth to this guy. And same thing here. I want to, I'm going to increase the number of iterations a little bit so that we get a nice smoothness to it. And this is going to become a little important later as I introduce you to another tool that is going to allow us to kind of mess this up and make it look more like fabric. Alright, so I got my NURMS on there, or I'm sorry, my turbo smooth. I'm going to leave that alone. In fact, I'm going to remove it for the time being, so I'm going to just go ahead and delete that. And now we've got this section of the couch. Now we need to build the interior section, which is right here. So I want to build the support part. And so I'm going to just do that with a regular old box. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my top orthographic viewport, and I'm going to create a standard primitive box, and I'm going to go ahead and just draw this guy out. And I'm not really being too careful on the width here or the height. Whoops. I'm just kind of guesstimating, and then I'm going to go ahead and enter to create it, and then I'm going to right click to get out of box creation mode. And then now what I want to do is I want to position this guy, and I want to create the back of the couch also. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and convert this box to an editable polygon, and I'm going to go into vertex mode first, and I'm just going to kind of make these vertices here match the profile of my existing model, and I'm just going to match the slope here, and that looks pretty good. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go into edge mode, and I'm going to select this edge, and I'm going to ring it out, and then I need to add another edge, and I'm going to actually slide this one towards the back here so that I can grab that, and I'm going to pull out from that the back half of this couch. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my extrude mode. I'm going to accept it, and then I'm going to use my manipulator here to pull it the rest of the way up. And then I'm going to pop over to my ortho, and I just want to check that I get the angle of this back of the couch to match my actual couch profile. And then I'm going to hit the E key for rotate, and I'm going to rotate that polygon there at the top to also match the angle of the back of that couch piece itself there. And then I'm just going to check my reference for a sec to see. It looks like those are kind of flush, and then they smooth down into the center of each other. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make this so that it's pretty much flush with the top of this piece, knowing that I'm going to smooth it down, and it'll kind of match. Alright, so now we got that midsection built, and we need to chamfer this to make it soft. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into object mode, and what I want to make sure is that this kind of just butts all the way up to the other object. because when I smooth this down, so I'm going to select all of those edges. When I smooth this down, I'm going to deselect these interior edges because I don't want to chamfer those. And I'm going to right click here and say hide unselected for a sec so that I can deselect these guys. Alright. Don't want to chamfer any of the interior edges, so I'm going to get rid of those. And so I only have the exterior edges selected. And now I can unhide all because I want to see this and I want to match the roundness of this to the roundness that I'm about to put on this. So I'm going to say chamfer. And the first one I'm going to do here, I'm going to make it a little wider, trying to match that. So I'm going to say OK. And then remember, I want to select all these interior edges that just got created. So I'm going to right click and say hide unselected. And I'm going to do these manually because I don't want to get fancy and make a mistake and have my video messed up. So here we go. I'm going to select all these edges here. Select these guys. And select these guys. Okay, I hope I haven't made any mistakes here. If I have, I'm sure someone will call me on it. There we go. Just got these extra two. Okay, and I'm going to go ahead and chamfer this guy one more time. And what I'm trying to do here is get that tiny little triangle in the middle with the even spacing of these edges, and that's pretty much perfect. So I'm going to go ahead and say OK. At this point, I'm going to go ahead and say unhide all. And what we've got here is we've got our couch with the interior section. And for color, I'm going to kind of make it a blue. And we're going to do that same blue for this one. And so we're almost there. We got a nice little rounded couch. And at this point, I could go ahead and I'm going to just regular old copy this one rather than mirror, because this thing is pretty much symmetrical, so there'd be no reason for me to mirror it. Okay, and we got our couch piece there. Now we just need to make some couch cushions. So let's go ahead and do that. Let's go ahead and create a box. So I'm going to say create standard primitives box. And I'm going to go ahead and just come into the top orthographic viewport for a sec and create my box shape. I'm going to make it so it's about half of that couch, and then give it a height there, and then I got to move this up into position. Whoops. Move this, accidentally selecting. There we go, rather than moving. Okay, move this up into position, maximize that viewport, and then now we're going to make a couch cushion. So I'm going to give this guy a little bit of room between the frame here, and then what I'm going to do is right click on this and convert it to an editable poly, and then I'm going to go into edge mode. And I'm going to select this guy, and I want to do my double chamfer trick. So this one, this cushion is pretty fluffy, so I'm going to extrude it, and I'm going to make my first extrusion a lot bigger this time, and I'm going to say OK. And then because this guy is all exterior edges, I can just blanket select it again, and then I'm going to chamfer that one more time. And remember what I'm looking for here. I'm looking for equal spacing between these edges and that tiny little triangle there in the middle. And that's pretty close. I don't want to make that triangle too small though, but that looks pretty good. Now I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And so I got my couch cushion built out, and it's pretty smooth and pretty round. Let's go ahead and just test it and see what it looks like if I do a NURM subdivision on it. And that looks pretty smooth, pretty good actually. But what if I wanted to give it a little bit more fluffiness and a little bit more character? So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to select these edges here, and I'm going to wring this guy out, and I'm going to connect it, and I want to give it a decent number. I kind of like the number 5 here, and I'm going to say OK. And then I'm going to select these guys here, and I'm going to wring this out as well, and I'm going to connect this, and rather than 5, this one I can do with like a 3. I think is pretty good. And what I want to do now is I want to use my soft selection to give this top a little bit more of a bubbled form, because if you look at my photograph here, the couches kind of bubble up. They're a little bit misshapen and whatnot, and so I had to add some extra edges in order to add that shape. So I'm going to go into vertex mode, and I'm going to select just one of these vertices here at the top. You could even select like an odd amount here, and then I'm going to go into my soft selection. Where is it? Editable poly, soft selection was collapsed. So I'm going to go into my soft selection. I'm going to change my pinch value because I just want this to be very rounded. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to change my fall off so that it selects kind of the whole top of that couch. And I'm just going to kind of pull it up a little bit, and then I might just go and do a couple of the vertices solo at a time here. And what I'm trying to do is I'm just trying to make this thing a little bit imperfect. And I'm not going to go crazy here with this one, because the purpose of these videos is to hide unselected. The purpose of these videos is for me to show you the techniques rather than actually build a perfect couch, as if I were going to model this for a client or something. So on the other side, I'm just going to pull that down a little bit like so. And then if I wanted to, I could also go in here and add some more edge loops. So I'm going to turn off my soft select. I'm going to wring this out, and I'm going to go ahead and connect this guy one more time. So let's go ahead and do that. Connection, and whoops, that value, I believe I wanted to leave it 0. And instead of 3, let's just do 2. 3, I really feel like 3 is too many. 2 is kind of not enough though, because I want one in the middle. So I'm going to do 3 and say OK. And then same thing here. I'm going to go into vertex mode, and I'm going to select all these verts along the front. And I may as well just select them all the way around. So what I did was I shift double clicked it to select the ring of vertices all the way around. And then I'm going to go to the soft selection, and I'm going to dial this down a little bit. And what I want to do is I just want to bubble this out a little bit also from the side like so. Okay, and so we got our couch pillow, and I just varied it up, made it look a little not so uneven and a little bit puffier. And now I'm going to say unhide all. And at this point, let's just check the size of this guy to see if I got it right. Definitely got it a little too big. It really only comes out to about half of the armrest, and so that's okay. I'm going to turn off my soft selection, and I'm going to go to the editable poly here, and I want to scale this guy down, and so the cushion's just about half the height of the armrest. And then I can go ahead and push it into position here, and then I'm going to go ahead and make a copy of this guy and check the size, and I definitely got that a little too big to cover up half of that. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just going to scale it down a little bit and push it into position, and then make another copy. Say OK, and then I'm going to scale both of these simultaneously, and then I'm going to just kind of push them together. Okay, and what we could do here is we could also go into the soft selection. I don't want to obsess over this, but I'm going to just grab this and kind of pull that up a little bit, and do this on the underside as well. and because these were just looking a little flat to me. See, I can't do it. I can't just leave it alone. I have to tweak. Alright, there we go. So I got my cushions, and now I'm going to make these guys the same color as the couch. And now I can reuse this because I don't want to remake those for the back, so I'm going to go ahead and select my pivot point. I'm going to say Effect Pivot Only. I'm going to move my pivot point here back to be the base of the cushion, and you'll see why I'm going to do that here in a second. And then now I'm going to hit the E key for rotate, and I'm going to hold down my Shift key, and I'm just going to go ahead and rotate that guy up to make a copy, and then I'm going to position it into place as if it's resting on the top of the other one. And then we're going to go ahead and rotate that back a little bit. At this point I want to turn my angle snapping off. I just want to do this by eyeball because this is an organic form, and kind of the more imperfect it is actually this time the better. So I'm going to make that a little higher than the back. And then now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go into my editable poly, and I'm going to go into vertex mode. I'm going to find my friend, the soft selection again, and what I'm going to do here is I just want to grab all these and kind of, it'd be probably better if I do it one and pull it up, and I need to do my fall off. So I'm going to select the top here, change my fall off, and that's exactly what I wanted, and I'm just going to poof that up a little bit. Maybe not that much. Just a little. Just a little. Pull that down. Alright, that's fine. And then let's go ahead and hold down the Shift key and make a copy of it, and there we go. We got another couch cushion, and it's looking pretty cool. Now I just want to show you some other extended capabilities. So what if we wanted to add the detail on, say, the arm here, where if we look at our image, we have this kind of fabric effect where we've got pinching where the fabric's been folded over on itself. And let me try to find a better picture where I can show you that. Here we can see it on the side. So we have this little fabric pinch effect that runs down the side of the couch, and it kind of pinches and creases all the way along there. I want to show you how to do that, and I don't want to do them all, but hopefully you can use your imagination and see how you can use this exact same technique on the pillows. So I want to add that kind of fabric pinch look on my mesh here. And so what I'm going to do is I'm first going to select my armrest, and then I'm going to go into edge mode. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to select this edge loop all the way around the edge of my arm, and then I'm going to go ahead and select this loop over here, and then come back over here and loop that again. And I don't want those, so I'm going to deselect those and hope that it didn't do it. It did. I'm going to deselect that. So I'm going to do my fine zoom here and pick up that last edge. So what I want to kind of do is I want to do a simulation of that pinching for the fabric. And the way I'm going to do that is I'm going to use the extrude edge tool. So I'm going to go into extrude edge. I'm going to dial this back, and what the extrude edge will do is it'll put edges on either side of this guy, and then it allows me to kind of make a crease here. And I'm not going to do this perfect, but you can see here that I can kind of start to get that effect. And then if I were to go ahead and put a NURMS smooth on this so we could just see the smooth version of it, we can see here that we can get the effect of the fabric pinching very easily, just by doing that. Ideally, if you were going to do this to a ridiculous degree, which I would if I were doing this for a client, I'd probably do another one to even harden this edge up further. But for now, we're just going to go ahead and do it quick and dirty. And so I'm going to go ahead and get out of this. So we did the arm with the pinching effect, and we can see that if I turn on. And doesn't that look pretty good? It looks awesome. And then I want to do it for the pillows, right? So I don't know what they actually look like in my photos, but let's see. There's no piping on these. If there were, you could use that technique that I showed you on the pillow on how to do the piping. But I believe these pillows just kind of have creases, just like a regular old couch cushion. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to select one of these guys, and I'm going to just go ahead and select an edge loop all the way around. So let's go ahead and do this, turn off the soft select, and I'm going to loop it all the way around, and then I'm going to select underneath here, and I'm going to loop that all the way around, and then I'm going to go ahead and just grab this edge and then this edge, and I'm not doing this perfectly. I'm trying to just show you the concept again. And so here we go. I got those edges, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to do the extrude edge one more time, and I'm going to pinch it back, and then I'm going to tighten those edges up on the corner, and then I'm going to say OK. And if I NURMS smooth this object and hide the control cage, we can see here, again, if I turn that off, we got that nice couch pinching effect, and that looks pretty sweet in a render. And then you could just go and do the same thing for pretty much all the objects in the scene. Okay, now that we have that, you might be asking yourself, wow, that was pretty cool. What if I could go in and actually start sculpting these objects and basically adding some more deformation and some more non-uniform look to make it look more like fabric. And if you were thinking that, I would commend you on your imagination in terms of becoming more of a professional modeler. So I want to show you another tool here, and I'm going to use the couch cushion for it. And this tool is called the Freeform Modeling Tools. And so right now it's hidden, so I must have it turned off here. So I'm going to go to, hold on one second. Okay, so the tools I were looking for are called the ribbon or the graphite modeling tools. And for some reason, I must have hit a hotkey and hid them. The way we do it is we go into where is it? Customize, Show UI, and I'm looking for the ribbon. So I'm going to say Show Ribbon, and I hope this doesn't crash. It's looking like it wants to. There we go. Okay, so you guys may have seen this up here. The normal method for showing it or hiding it is this button right here, and you can collapse that. This is called the ribbon or the graphite modeling tools, and what this allows you to do, the one section I'm about to show you, is under Freeform, and I'm going to show you the paint or the sculpt tools under the Freeform modeling. The way this works is your object first has to have an editable poly on it. If it doesn't, you just right click on it and say Convert to Editable Poly. Once you do that, now you can have access to the ribbon and the graphite modeling tools. And I want to show you these tools. They're pretty awesome. So I went ahead and just, when I changed this, I subdivided it one more time, and that's fine, because this tool actually craves extra edges. So I want to show you how this works. The first tool is the Shift tool. And the cool thing about this guy is that if you just hover your cursor over long enough, it'll tell you what the tool is, and then it'll tell you like all the hotkeys and everything for the tool itself. So you just let it hover long enough, and we have it tells you shift drag to change the radius, etc. So I'm just going to go ahead and start doing it. So I'm going to click this tool, and it's got this exterior black radius and the interior white radius. And what this allows you to do is just kind of smudge your surface, and it's really great. So I can kind of change the if you hold on the shift key and you drag, that'll change the interior strength. And the way it works is that the distance between that interior circle and the exterior circle is basically going to make it a very soft brush. If the distance is very sharp, it's going to make it a very hard brush. See how that works? So the strength of this tool is to basically just have a very, very soft brush, and so you can see how I can just, it's kind of like just if you were able to grab the object and smudge it yourself. It's really awesome. And we can see here that in a very short amount of time I can get kind of a very organic look to my couch cushion here. And again, I'm not going to obsess over this. So that's one, that's the shift. That's for moving pixels around, or vertices around, I mean. And then we have the push-pull. And push-pull basically allows you to, exactly what it says, push or pull the object. So we have this brush with this radius, and if I hold down the shift, hold on. If I hold down, trying to find the keys. If I hold down the Alt and the shift, this changes the intensity of the brush. Right now it's pulling, so I'm going to undo that. So that's Alt plus shift, and that'll change the intensity. And if I hold down the shift and control keys, I can change the brush's size. So we can see here we can make it much bigger. And then if I hold down the shift key, it will actually smooth. So it'll take whatever it is you've done and smooth it. And you just want to maybe experiment and play around with these controls until you get comfortable with them. And what this allows you to do is quickly kind of distort a surface and get a little bit different shape. So you can see how I started with one shape, and then within a very short period of time I was actually able to modify the shape and get it to look a lot more organic and natural, just like a couch cushion. The other feature under here that was push-pull is relax and soften, and that basically does the same thing as if you were in push-pull and held down the shift key. That would also do the exact same operation. Flatten and pinch, we'll get into those later when we start modeling our characters. Smudge, again, we'll get into that. Noise is kind of cool. It allows you to paint noise onto a surface so that you can just create like a little bit of variation in the surface just by painting with your paintbrush. It's really cool. And then exaggerate will just take whatever the feature is and make it more pronounced. Alright, so that's that tool. I'm going to get back into that a little bit more when we model our bedspread. So very cool tool, and you can see here in just a very short period of time I got my couch cushion all messed up and muddled up, and I got the seam in there. So very cool tool. I really strongly recommend that you guys play around with that. Okay, so I'm starting to have some graphics card issues here again. I'm just going to render this out so you can see here my nice little couch. Alright, the next thing I want to do, I'm going to reset my scene, is I'm going to build a set of curtains. And I'm going to show you how easy this is. So I'm going to go into my front orthographic viewport, and I'm going to create a standard primitive, and I'm going to do a plane. I'm going to make it about curtain height and width here, as if the curtains are kind of drawn to the side. And then I'm going to get out of plane creation mode by right-clicking. And the first thing I'm going to do is change the color of this object, because I'm going for kind of an old Hollywood glam curtain, so I'm going to give it a nice crimson red color. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the construction parameters for my plane. I'm going to hit F4 to show my edged faces. I'm going to hit J to hide my bounding box, and I'm going to hit G to hide my grid. And I'm going to increase the number of segments and length to, I'm just going to do 8. And then in height, I'm going to do something very high. I'm going to do like 50. Okay, now we're going to come back to that noise modifier that we used on the book. And so I'm going to select my plane here, and I'm going to go over here into the modifier stack for the plane, and I'm going to go ahead and add a noise. So I'm going to pull this thing down and say noise. And remember, the noise adds the noise node on top, and then it's got underneath a gizmo in the center. The one we're after is called gizmo. And I always just pull that gizmo out to the side so I can kind of see what it's doing. If you let it lay right over the top of the object, it kind of becomes hard to see what it's trying to do. So now the gizmo's pulled off to the side, I'm going to give it a seed value. So under the this is just under the noise, so you can click on the noise. I'm going to give the noise a seed value. I usually start with 50. 50 usually works pretty well. I'm going to do a fractal because that makes it a little bit more random. And then now I have to find the strength. So I usually just start playing with this value until I see some movement. And then I don't want to move it in Y because that's not what I want unless I was going for a haunted house look. And it looks like the value that I'm after is Z. And see how it's starting to distort this mesh? It's kind of looking more like a magic carpet right now than it is a curtain. So what I need to do is I need to select that gizmo, and I'm going to go ahead and scale the gizmo down. And when I do that, you can see what happens is this guy starts to look more like a curtain, and then we find out that our Z value is actually too pronounced. So I'm going to go give it a little less, and then that's kind of the haunted house look. That's not what I'm after, so I'm going to leave that pretty much straight up and down. And then I'm going to go ahead and kind of get rid of the noise value in X also, because I don't really want that. And then finally what I want to do is I want to scale this guy up, the gizmo. What that's going to do is it's going to, I'm going to hit F4, and we can see here that we're starting to get something that actually looks like a curtain. And if I do the Z value here, we can give it a little bit more depth. And let's just go ahead and say that looks good and call it a day. So there's my curtain. And then what I need to do is shape it a little bit further. And in order to do that, I'm going to go to the top of the stack, which currently is the noise. And I'm going to go into my modifier stack, and I'm going to grab a modifier in here by the name of FFD. So see, there's a number of them. There's FFD 2x2. These are just presets, 2x2, 3x3x3, 4x4. The one I want to grab is the FFD box, and I'm going to go ahead and add it. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the set number of points. So what you want to do with this FFD, or freeform deformer, is imagine it as if it is a low polygon cage that encompasses your object and allows you to distort the underlying high resolution object based on its low resolution cage or stature. So I'm going to click on the set number of points, and in length I'm going to change this to something a little higher, like 5. The reason for that is because I'm about to create a sash look where I'm going to pull this curtain up to the side as if there was a sash there suspending it. And in order to do that, I need one edge here, one edge here. I need an edge in the middle for the sash, and then an edge on either side so that it gets a nice fall off. And so in length I'm going to do 5, and then in width and height, that's all fine. I'm going to leave those at the default, which is 4x4. Okay, so now I got my FFD set up. If you'll notice here, there's a plus key next to it, so I'm going to expand it. And I'm going to go to control points, and what I'm going to do here is I'm going to grab all of these control points here at the bottom, and I'm just going to kind of scale them non-uniform in one dimension, and I'm going to pull this over to the side, and you can see here that we're starting to get this to look like a curtain. And then I can grab these, and I'm just going to rotate these guys a little bit like so, and you can just pull these points a little bit if you want to mess with it and get it to look a little bit more uniform, or I'm sorry, a little bit more organic. And we can go ahead and scale this. In this case, I'm just going to go ahead and scale these down, pull this up, and then all you would have to do after this is just go ahead and model yourself a little sash piece to go around there, and you'd be done. You'd have a curtain. So I'm going to go to the top of the stack here, We got a little curtain object, and then I'm going to hold down the shift, or actually I want to, yeah, I'm going to duplicate this. So I'm going to hold down the shift key, make a copy, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the FFD, and I'm going to scroll down here, and I want to click on the control points, and I'm going to say reset, and see what that does. That resets my object. And then now I'm going to go ahead and just rotate, whoops, I'm going to rotate the entire object 90 degrees. Here I'm going to use my angle snaps because I want to make sure I rotate it perfectly 90 degrees. Turn back off my snapping. And then now I'm going to go into the FFD, into the control points. I'm going to select all the points on the sides. And I'm going to scale them down. Whoops. I want both sides. And I'm going to scale those guys down. And then I'm going to pull those up. And then I'm going to grab the ones in the middle, pull it down. And now we've got a horizontal curtain. And I'm going to go to the top of the stack and scale this guy uniform. And then I'm going to pull it up into position here. And I'm going to push it back behind the other curtain. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down the shift key and make a copy curtain, say OK. And then I'm going to go ahead and grab this guy and I'm going to mirror it, make a copy. And there we go. We've got a set of curtains for a window. Cool thing about this is because it's all procedural. If you see, we have kind of these steps here in the objects on both of them. If you want to smooth that out, you can go down to the very bottom and go to the plane node, and we can increase the number of edges, and we can see here that immediately it's smoothed out the effect of the curtain. You can add less or more ripples. See how that works? It's kind of nice to get the desired effect that you're looking for. And you do the same thing on all of these. So I can just select this guy. I go down to the plane, increase the number of steps, and then I can decrease the number of edges and get this to kind of look whatever I want. So knock yourself out with that. It's a nice, quick, and easy way to create curtains. And again, now that I tweak these a little bit, you can go back into the control points and adjust as well. Here you can do the points individually if you want. And you really have a lot of flexibility and control in order to get the shape that you're looking for. So I'm going to go ahead and reset. So I'm going to reset my scene. Yes, I want to reset. And the next thing I want to do for you guys is I'm going to do a bedspread. So what I'm going to first build is a mock-up object. So I'm going to create a standard primitive. So I'm going to do a box. I'm going to do it in my top orthographic viewport, and I'm just going to kind of create a little cow king bed and give it some height. And then what I'm going to do here is I'm going to set up a loft object. So I'm going to go back into the top ortho, and I'm going to create a shape line, and I'm just going to kind of draw out a comforter shape, and I'm kind of doing it as a poly control cage. So I'm doing it at kind of the lowest resolution possible. And then what I want to do, that's my path for my comforter. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to create a shape for the path. So I'm going to go here into my front orthographic viewport, and I'm going to create shapes, line, and I'm going to draw kind of a shape here. I'm going to come down. I'm going to just leave this kind of broad, and you'll see why here in a little bit. And I'm going to curl that under for my comforter shape. And then I'm going to go ahead and create my loft object. So I'm going to hit the J key to get rid of that bounding box. And I'm going to select this line, which is my shape. And then I'm going to go into my Create tab, Geometry, drop down from Standard Primitives to Compound Objects, and I want to do a loft. I have my path selected, so I'm going to say Get Shape, and I'm going to click on it. It kind of creates this crazy mess here. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to fix this. So I'm going to get out of loft creation mode, and I'm going to select the object, which is now a loft. And I'm going to go into the loft settings, and what I want to do is I want to change the skin parameters. I'm going to dial these down to 0 and 0. And so what I'm looking for is I just wanted to create a control cage object. And so it's kind of a jumbled mess right now, and now I get to actually fix that mess. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go into the shape, and I'm going to select my shape curve, and I just want to scale it kind of down so that I get all those overlapping points off of each other. And then what I want to do here is I'm going to edit this shape a little bit. So I'm going to get rid of my bounding box, and I'm going to move this shape up a little. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to convert this guy to an editable poly, and I'm going to start pulling points. So what we have here is we have that kind of curl under where the comforter kind of starts to bounce out, and then we've got this position here where the comforter doesn't bunch anymore at the top. And so what I want to do here is I'm just going to space these out on the top and straighten them out a little bit. I just realized I had this planned and I wasn't going with my plan. I'm going to go ahead and I accidentally unconverted it, so I'm going to take it back to an editable poly. Alright, and now I'm going to select all of these vertices up here at the top, and I'm just going to uniform scale them down to a point like that, because this is actually the corner of my bed. And so I'm going to go into the top orthographic viewport, and I'm going to pull these points closer into the center here, and I'm going to grab these verts here, and I'm going to just move those off to the side. And this is a little tedious, but that's the way of the world sometimes. So what I'm going to do here is I'm just trying to, I have a curl there at the bottom of my bedspread, and I don't have a curl at the top. And so I want to have it flatten out at the top and curl under at the bottom. And so it's kind of tedious here to get this undistorted and achieve that effect, but I just don't think there's an easier way without getting into dynamics, which I'm going to show you kind of as a bonus at the end of this video. And then you guys have your choice if you want to pull points and build the bedspread this manner. You can go ahead and do that. And if you want to do it dynamically using the cloth simulation, then you can do it that way as well. It's totally up to you. So there we go. And trying to race along here and not really taking my time. Just to show you that this can be done this way. Okay, and I'm going to call that close enough. Alright, so I got my little sash here at the bottom corner, and then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to take a bunch of these vertices here at the top on this interior corner, and I'm going to collapse them all. So I'm going to grab all those guys, and then I'm going to say collapse. And the reason for that is because I don't need all those interior verts for my comforter at the top. I only needed them for the curvature portion of the comforter. And then now what I can do is I can go into my edge mode and I can extrude these edges over. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. And remember, the extrude is kind of weird. It's really made to pretty much do something different, I believe. It's not really made to extrude edges, and once you guys get into Maya, you'll know how easy it is to extrude an edge. But in Max, it doesn't extrude it correctly, and so what I usually do is I just extrude it. I let it mess it up, and then I just manually move it into position the way I want. And so I'm going to extrude it one more time, and I'm going to say OK. And then I'm going to move it into position. So there's kind of half my bedspread. And then I need to weld all those vertices that I just created here to their corresponding edges on the bedspread. I kind of missed an edge here, so I'm going to go into edge mode, and I'm going to select this, and I'm going to ring it. And then I'm going to go ahead and connect it one time and then pull it over to make it coincide and match up with that vertex there. And then I'm going to select all my verts that I want welded and deselect the one that I don't. And then I'm going to go into my weld settings and increase it until they all pop together and say OK. And now all my vertices are welded. And I've kind of got my bedspread mocked up and modeled here. And at this point in the game, I could go ahead and mirror this guy. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to do a copy. And then I'm going to bring it over here to the center line. And now I'm going to go ahead and attach these models. So I'm going to go to a poly object, and I'm going to say attach. Select the other one. And then I'm going to go straight down the line here on my verts. I need to weld those, so I'm going to weld them together, create my threshold until they weld, but don't weld the ones I don't want. I got kind of a weird shape here, so I'm just going to do these two at a time and say collapse. Sometimes that's the easiest way to do it when your threshold fails you. Collapse, collapse, and collapse. Okay, so there's my bedspread, modeled kind of control cage level, or control cage grade. I want to add a few more edges here along the side, so I'm going to ring this out, and I'm going to connect it, and I'm going to add an extra edge there, and then I'm going to say OK. And then what I want to do here is I had always planned on smoothing this guy out. So I'm going to do that by adding an editable poly. I'm going to turbo smooth it. So I'm going to go into my stack here, and I'm going to go into the objects modifier stack, and I want to look for a turbo smooth. So I'm going to apply turbo smooth, and then basically subdivided my mesh a little bit more, and we start to get that effect of the bed strip kind of bunching and coming off the side of the bed. Alright, now you can imagine what I might want to do next, because this kind of looks way too uniform, not organic enough, not natural enough. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to collapse the stack. So I'm going to right click on it and say collapse to all, hold yes. And then remember, when you do that, it always makes it into an editable mesh. So I'm going to right click and convert it to an editable poly. And then now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to enter into the freeform tool under the ribbon, and I'm going to go into my shift tool, and I'm going to just start editing my object. And I can kind of pull this guy, I can start to get a fabric-y look. here for the sides. Can mess this up a little bit. And I'm not being very careful to get this to look right. I'm really just kind of showing the tool off. I've shown you a lot of stuff in a short period of time. If I want to soften these edges here, it's easier for me to do that. I can go into push-pull mode. And if I hold down my shift key, it's going to allow me to smooth that really fast. And you can see how well that works. And so what would have taken me a lot of time pulling points, kind of to relax, I can do that really fast with this tool. And so it allows me to kind of get that effect of the fabric falling off the side of the bed. And then if I wanted to add even more detail to this, kind of the ripples in the fabric, and again, we can pull these in. So if I wanted to intensify this effect here, do that. But if I wanted to paint in more of the ripples for the fabric, what I would do is I would go ahead and add a turbo smooth on top of this guy again and subdivide it even further, and I might even increase the number of iterations up a little higher. And I'm just going to bake this to show you how it works. So I'm going to collapse it, and then I'm going to go back into, I got to add an editable poly to the mesh, so I'm going to convert it to an editable poly. And then now what I want to do is I want to use the Sculpt Surfaces tool, or the push-pull, in order to start adding kind of the fabric-y look of the bed. And you'll see here that when you start using this guy, and you've got the mesh kind of resed up, very high resolution, the tool starts to slow down quite a bit, so you really want to be careful. And so I'm just going to kind of do this a little bit. And I don't want to do too much because it's slowing down. But you get the idea. If I go ahead and turn off the wireframe on shaded, you can see here that we can add the subtle creasing of the fabric. And it's really slowing down, so you have to find kind of there's a happy medium between the amount of resolution and then what you can add, how fast you can sculpt with this tool. Alright, so that's one way to make a bedspread. I want to show you another way. So I'm going to go ahead and reset my scene here. And I'm going to do the exact same thing. I'm going to create a standard primitive, and I'm going to do a box, and I'm just making kind of my cow king bed. And then what I want to do with this guy is I want to convert it immediately to an editable poly, and then I'm going to go ahead and select the edges here and go to F4 J to hide the bounding box, and I'm just going to go ahead and chamfer this guy to round off the edges. And this time I'm not going to do my double chamfer trick. I'm just going to go ahead and do a regular old chamfer, and then I'm going to go ahead and create a polygon plane. So I'm going to say plane, I'm going to do it in my top view, ortho, create my plane, and then say OK. And then I'm going to go ahead and create another plane, and this one I'm going to create directly over the bed. And this one I'm going to move up in space. And I'm going to also subdivide this one. I'm going to give it like 50 segments by 50 segments. And I'm going to rename this one, and I'm going to call it spread, or bedspread, to be more specific. And I'm going to call this one mattress. and I'm going to call this one floor. Alright, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select all of these objects simultaneously, and I'm going to go into my modifier stack, and I'm looking for a stack called, or a modifier called cloth. So I'm just going to dial up and down. There it is, cloth, right after object space modifiers cloth. I'm going to click that. And then under the cloth settings here, we have a button for object properties. So I'm going to click that. And it brings up our little dialog. And right to the left here, we can see we have the bedspread. So for the bedspread, I'm going to first select it so it's highlighted right there in blue. I'm going to click on cloth. And then under presets, I'm going to go ahead and just use a standard cotton. And then for the floor and the mattress, I'm going to hold down my control key and simultaneously select those. And I'm going to click on collision object, and I want to make these collision objects, and I'm just going to use the defaults there. And then I'm going to go ahead and say OK. And then I'm going to go over here under the cloth modifier, and under the faces, under the cloth modifier, I'm going to go ahead and say, where is it? Simulate. And this little dialog pops up, and it's running a simulation. And we can see here that it's just keeps colliding with that mattress basically until it creates the desired effect. And we'll just let it run to the end. Why not? And now we have our bedspread. So a cool thing about this guy, this cloth utility or modifier, is it allows you under the faces, you can go in here and under, so I'm in faces in the sub-object of the cloth simulator, and I can click on simulate local, and I can do live drag. And what this allows me to do is I can control click, and I can just keep, unfortunately the paint selection doesn't work with this. I can keep control clicking, and I can select a bunch of faces, and I can lift those up. It gets a little slow, so you want to be careful, but you can kind of start adding your own creases and folds to the sim just by kind of pulling stuff around and moving it around. You got to be careful. Notice how this thing keeps evaluating. The thing about this cloth simulation is that it's live, and so it's going to keep evaluating, and so therefore it's going to keep changing the shape of your mesh. And so if you want to keep the changes of your object, what you're going to have to do is you're going to have to go up here and collapse the stack. Alright, I'll show you how to do that here in a second. So let's just say, and this is kind of funny, I just did this one. It's like, I remember when I was a little kid and I used to hide under the bed, and I thought no one could see me, so I'm just going to go ahead and do that. Here's a little 5-year-old Joel hiding from his mom under the bed. So I select a bunch of these, and I'm just going to pull them up. And why is it not letting me do it? Oh, because I have to be on simulate local and live drag. For some reason it got pulled off. And so you can see here that we have the effect of a little kid hiding under the bed. And then once you're done, you just say, there we go. So this is a very cool effect. And then the cool thing about this also is I'm going to undo that last setting. So I'm going to go back here to the cloth, and I'm just going to say simulate local, and I'm going to let this thing relax back down. And then that's good. And what I can do here is I just want to show you how to make a copy of this object. So remember, the cloth modifier is totally live here, and it will keep evaluating. So in order to bake the simulation and keep your changes, what you need to do is you need to right click here at the top and say collapse all. And when you do that, then what's going to happen is now that shape has been baked into the mesh. And so you can imagine what we need to do here. If I want to sculpt this further, is I can go ahead and first convert it to an editable poly, and then I'm going to add a turbo smooth, and then from there I can go ahead and flatten this one more time, say fine, and then I'm going to go ahead and convert it to an editable poly, which would make it paintable. And once it's paintable, I can go in here and do my further editing, where I can add my extra folds and whatnot, whatever I want to do. If I want to muck this up in any way, and I'm not really going to try to do this as an art asset. I'm just really kind of just showing you the technique here. And then I'm going to use my smooth brush to just kind of smooth over the painting that I did, the sculpting here. Alright, and then finally, after, let's say you've done your sculpting and you've gotten this thing to look how you want it to look, you've distorted it and gotten your imperfect surface in there. The next thing that you would do is you probably want to give this a thickness. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go here into the modifier stack, and I'm going to grab that modifier by the name of shell, and shell will just take that guy and give it a thickness. And then once I've done that, then what I would do is I would turbo smooth it one more time. So I'll turbo smooth it, and there we go. And then if you wanted to kind of give it a stitched effect at the seam here, I'm going to go ahead and add an edit poly above here. So I'm going to go into my stack and I'm going to say edit poly. I'm going to go to vertex or edge mode, and I'm going to select this loop here. I'm going to loop it all the way around my surface, and then what I would do is I would go into the extrude edge, and this is kind of a dense mesh, and I'm not sure, I think there might still be a cloth simulation going on in here. And so this might, I just might crash the computer. Here we go. I want to create the effect of, there we go. Oops. So I'm trying to create the effect of crashing max. There we go. Whoops. I'm going to try a different value, 0.003. There we go. And then I'm going to do negative 0.005 to pull that back, and then I'm going to say OK. And so what I've effectively done there is I've created kind of a seam, and my graphics card's really starting to say I hate you. And so I got my bedspread here. I've given it a thickness, and then I've created a seam to give it a realistic effect, and that's pretty much it. So pretty cool little effect, and yeah, you guys can play around with that. I'm going to reset the seam because it's starting to freak out on me. And then the final thing I want to do for you guys is I want to show you how to make a plant. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to start with a standard primitive. I'm going to do a plane here. And there we go. I'm going to create a plane, and what this is going to be is basically just a plant leaf. Doesn't really look like one yet, but it will. And now I'm going to right click on it and convert it to an editable poly. I'm going to go into vertex mode here, and I'm going to grab the base, and I'm going to hit the R key, and I'm going to kind of non-uniform scale this. And I'm just kind of creating the shape of a leaf. I'm going to select these verts and I'm going to pull these forward like so. And then I'll go ahead and scale this one down a little bit. And we'll just say that looks pretty good. And kind of made a mistake there. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to rotate that down. I meant to create this guy in the top ortho, and I did it accidentally in the front. So I'm going to rotate this down. And then now I'm going to go into vertex mode, and I'm going to select all these verts right down the center. And actually, before I do that, I'm doing this as a control cage mesh. So before I do that, I want to go ahead and turbo smooth. So I'm going to add a turbo smooth modifier to this guy so that I have some extra edges in there. And then I'm going to bake it down. So I'm going to say collapse to all. And then I'm going to go into vertex mode here. And I'm going to shift double click. So, and it's not wanting to work for me. So I'll do it via, oh, it's because I'm in an editable mesh. I always make that mistake. So I'm going to right click on this guy and convert it to an editable poly. Go into vertex mode and shift double click to select the entire row of vertices down the center. And then I'm going to use the soft selection, and I'm going to pull the center point down of my leaf. And I want to increase the pinch value on this, so it just kind of gives it a nice sharp crease. And then I'm going to increase the fall off a little bit so that we get a nice sharp crease down the leaf. That looks pretty good. And then the next thing I'm going to do is I want to bend my leaf. So I'm going to grab the leaf and I'm going to add a bend modifier. So I'm going to go down here into the modifier stack and I'm going to select bend. And then with the bend modifier, it can be a little dizzying trying to figure out which angle you need. See how that I'm putting a bend angle on here and it's kind of distorting my object like crazy. So what I usually like to do here is I change this value. In this case it actually worked, but sometimes you don't get this thing oriented correctly. And so what I usually do is I'll just try the value, so bend in X, and then, whoops, you really don't want to mess with that direction setting at all. You just want to mess with the angle. So you bend it a little bit, and when you see the modifier starting to behave like you want, then what you do is you rotate it, the actual bend gizmo, until you get the desired position. So see how that works? I can, unfortunately this one actually worked, so what I'm saying to you probably doesn't make a whole lot of sense. But when this guy comes in the wrong axis, so let's try this. So Z, that's wrong. Let's try Y. That's wrong. It's X. Sometimes you'll just get a little bit of bend and it would be oriented in this direction instead. And you just basically rotate it around until you get it. And that's how it works. So there we go. I'm going to change the color of my leaf to be kind of a green. I don't like that green. There we go. And then now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go to the top of the stack and I'm going to add another edit poly. And as I'm doing that, I realized I don't know why I'm doing that. That's okay, I'm going to leave it. And then we're going to go ahead and do a go to hierarchy, and we're going to say effect pivot only. And what I want to do is I want to move this pivot to be at the base of the actual leaf itself. Okay, and then I'm going to say okay. And then now what I can do is I can just tilt this leaf up. And what I want to do now is I want to make a bunch of copies of this leaf. So I'm going to hold down my shift key and I'm going to rotate. And I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And then my clone options are going to pull up. And I'm going to go ahead and click on copy, and then the number of copies I want to make in this case is 3, and I'm going to say OK. We can see here now that we've created 4 leaves, and then I'm going to go ahead and take one of these guys, and I'm going to duplicate it again. So I'm going to say Control D, or actually, sorry, not Control D. I'm going to just hold the Shift key, and I'm going to copy it up, straight up. And I'm going to say OK, and then I'm going to kind of rotate this one up a little bit, and maybe I want to make it a little smaller or a little thinner, and then I'm going to rotate it a little bit also to be kind of converse to the other leaf. And then now what I'm going to do is I'm going to hold down my Shift key again, and I'm going to rotate it 90 degrees. And I'm going to say copy, and I'm going to say make another 3. And now we've got kind of concentric plant type shapes going on here. And then finally I'm going to go ahead and make another copy. I'm going to rotate this one down a little bit. And then I'm going to rotate this one a little also. And I'm going to pull this one out because these are all kind of currently intersecting each other. And that's not really, what I'm going to do is I'm going to use this last group to hide the interior of the intersecting geometry for the other group. I'm just going to position that a little bit. And then I'm going to go into my top orthographic viewport. And what I want to do is I'm going to change the pivot point of this leaf so that it's kind of at the center of my plant. And you'll see why that works here in a sec. So I'm selecting my object. And of course that pivot point is not moving. This is kind of a max glitch where I'm going to go affect pivot point, and so you see it adjusts there, but the moment I turn it off then it moves it. So I'm going to say affect pivot point, and I want to move that pivot point to be the center. And then now I'm going to grab this object, and I'm going to hold on my Shift key, and this time I'm going to move it like 30 degrees. No, sorry, 45. I'm going to do 45 degrees. And I'm going to make 6 copies. And we can see here I got 1 too few, so I'm going to do 45 degrees. And I'm going to make 7 copies. And there we see we have a plant. And if we wanted to, we could go in and mess it up a little bit, because in the stacks I left all those bend modifiers on there. So you can go into the gizmo, you can change the angle. I think you can change the axis here, or the direction, and so see how we can grab each one of these and kind of start varying it a little bit. And I don't want to spend a lot of time doing that, but I just want to show you guys that you could do that. So I'm going to go into the bend modifier here, go to the gizmo, and here I can change the direction on this one a little bit. I can change the angle to make it droop more, and with not that much effort, you could basically get your plant to look kind of as varied as you wanted to. And you could also use this to build a flower. So in class I believe I did a tulip for you guys, and this is just kind of a more abbreviated version of the same thing. Alright, so good luck on your projects. I covered quite a bit of material. Oh, one more thing I wanted to show you on this one. So this is kind of the low poly version of this object, and then again, if you wanted to add make this rounded in a film res asset, what you would do is you just go in here to the modifier stack, and I'm going to add a shell, and that's just going to add a thickness to it, and then I go ahead and add another turbo smooth, and we can see here how that finishes off that leaf and gives it a nice soft edge. And if I render that one, you can see how the one that has the thickness to the leaf actually looks a lot more convincing than the other ones, and that would be your final step if you wanted to make your plant look photoreal. Alright, so good luck. I believe I've got you covered in terms of making a killer room. So I can't wait to see what you guys do, and we'll see you next time. Thanks.